afternoon. At the tone, Pacific Daylight Time will be 5, 4, and 30 seconds.
What? Oh my God, we're having an earthquake. Wait a minute. Hold on. Can you feel that? Yes, I sure can. Okay, this is interesting. There go the lights. Oh.
We are here today with Maria Bonsall, Bill Bonsall, and David Terrazas. It is the 22nd of August. We are at the Aptos Library, and we're here to talk about the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this.
So I'm just going to start by asking, how long have you all been in Santa Cruz?
For over 30 years, probably 40 years.
Yeah, I actually moved to Santa Cruz in 1989. I graduated from college and came here in July. My mom had lived here before, but it was ironic. I just moved here in 1989.
Okay.
And Maria and I lived in the San Lorenzo Valley in the late 70s, and then returned. And we have all families here, so I live in Santa Cruz, and we've been on the west side for the past 20 years. And but I've lived, I feel like, in just about every city in Santa Cruz County. Capitol and Rio Del Mar, Aptos,
You're right.
La Selva Beach.
All over.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We've seen it all.
Yeah.
Great. So go ahead, in whatever order you're comfortable with, describe what you were doing during the earthquake.
So I was working at Gottschalk's on Pacific Garden Mall. It's now a movie theater, across from the Cooper House. And I was a manager there, and upstairs at having a meeting. And it was the end of the day. And all of a sudden everything started shaking, the lights went off, everybody, you heard lots of people screaming. Everybody got under the tables, of course, until it stopped. And I remember coming out of the meeting, where we were out of the wherever, and everything was dark. And from what I remember, you could kind of almost see the outside from where we were at, near the lingerie department. And I went downstairs to where my office was, and it was a mess. And just being there was scary, quite scary. Not knowing, of course, there was no cell phones at the time, so David, my brother, was in another country. Bill, who was my boyfriend at the time, was over the hill in San Jose, along with the rest of my family. And not knowing what they knew about what was happening over here, it was pandemonium, and trying to get to my car. And then I remember driving over, there's traffic everywhere, driving over the bridge over San Lorenzo Valley during the aftershocks, not knowing if the bridge is going to sustain the weight of the cars, as well as all the aftershocks. So that was what I was kind of doing.
What did it look like when you left Gottschalk's and walked out, and like when you looked along Pacific Avenue?
There was rubble everywhere, people everywhere. It was like pandemonium out. No one knowing what was going on, and it was kind of crazy. And then it was very eerie driving along Highway 1 because there was so much commotion and rubble and destruction downtown, and then Highway 1 was empty, eerily empty.
Really?
And Bill's mom lived in Sea Cliff at the time, and I remember thinking, okay, I wonder if any of my family was here. Drive by their house, it was empty, and I lived in La Selva Beach at the time, and of of course, nobody was at my my house, and not being able to get in the door just because of everything that had fallen, but not knowing if it is someone, a looter, or someone trying that was blocking the door, and feeling lonely.
And scared, yeah. It was scary. I was over in San Jose coaching football, and I was on the football field, and it was such a violent shake of the earth that I had to actually brace myself. If I hadn't, I would have fallen. And it was quite interesting that the team was just finishing running a lap, and there was a swim meet going on at the same time, and we were told that people were just thrown out of the pool like a big wave. Wow. It just washed them out of the pool, which is not surprising. I mean, it was a very violent shake.
Was this kids football or adult football?
This was high school football. Yeah. So although that was a humongous shake and quake and everything, I still didn't realize the impact until I got in my car and turned on the radio and heard all the stuff about the Bay Bridge. And then it was really scary to hear about a report about a female who had died in Pacific Garden Mall, and then knowing Maria was working there, that was super scary. And no cell phones and no communication, and the landlines weren't working, and so it was a chaotic and scary moment, but I was able to make it back over to the side of the hill the next day and make contact with Maria and clean up a lot of the mess. So.
Yeah, and for me, Maria mentioned I was over in Italy at the time. I was my second year of college, and I can remember being woken up by someone that lived in the house, and they told they said that there'd been an earthquake, and they brought me down to look at the Italian news and watching images of the Bay Bridge. And at that time it was the World Series, and you had the Giants playing the A's. And so I remember, because I was a Giants fan and thinking, hopeful that they were going to do well. And then getting woken up in the middle of the night to see this, the Bay Bridge just like snapped. And then they showed images of like graphics where it was a kind of a line that showed the proximity to where the earthquake, the epicenter was, which was right here near Aptos in Nicene Marks, and thinking if that kind of damage would take place in San Francisco, seeing the marina just collapsing, and the Bay Bridge again snapped, people standing up at the World Series, shocked.
Terrified.
I think it was at the Coliseum that day.
It was at Candlestick.
It was at Candlestick, and I was thinking, man, what happened to Santa Cruz? And so Maria was like, this was like pre-cell phone, so there was landlines, and no one knew where she was. Most of my family was staying with a relative in San Jose, and there were periodic calls and to try and find out where she was. And so it was really it was very I was very nervous and worried about her because of her being downtown, and thinking that didn't know what to expect. Mm-hmm. And then finally, a couple days later, I don't think it was for a couple days.
No.
That then didn't hear from him.
No, it was the next.
It was the next day.
The next day.
Well, next night, our night.
It was our night, yeah. So I'm not sure.
So it's like it felt like maybe 2 days.
2 days.
Maybe 2 days for you.
Because our dad came back from, and I remember just so grateful. He made it, and he was terrified, crying, because he didn't know where I was, where anybody was. And I remember him, coming up to the house, and just so great. I was just so grateful I saw them. And then Bill came later, and we got his dog, and that night we all stayed the night at our house in La Selva in a very tiny entryway with on the floor, because it was the quickest way out. It was a multi-leveled house, and And we had the dog who threw up at every aftershock, and then my dad and his wife, and Bill and myself, and then David calling from Italy
That's right.
that night and getting a hold of us and finally being able to talk to him that night. So it was the second night after the earthquake, and but just being grateful, being able to talk to him, and running outside every couple seconds because of
There's a lot of aftershocks.
Yeah, I remember them telling me that because of the aftershocks, some people were sleeping outdoors. There's like in La Selva Beach, there was an area and people were staying outside because of the shakes and worried about the house not being stable or perhaps causing even more damage with each aftershock. So it was like, but that even like ongoing basis, just feeling like okay, things aren't nothing, it doesn't feel like it's normal, and you're so far away. It even made things even seem more pronounced and.
Because you're not in any control or can see anything. Firsthand.
Yeah, and the images that were shown overseas in Europe were like, all the worst images you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, those are the ones on the news.
And I remembered I was in. I worked down on Pacific Avenue before I left, down at Pacific Garden Imports, which was a little bit further down from where the Del Mar Theater is now. And at that time, I have that recollection in my mind of what Pacific Garden Mall was like. The old mall with the Cooper House, and it was. I was telling Maria a couple days ago about the same time, maybe a few months before I left, is when the sock shop company moved in. And I thought, I can't imagine how long they'll last. And now they've done so well.
Yeah.
But it was on the other side of the mall, down kind of down closer towards where like Shogun and those businesses are.
Okay.
And then thinking about all the damage after, then coming back afterwards to see it in person when I returned, it was like just like. Wow, it's like this complete transition from what was once there to like this new kind of like literally level feel where how is everything going to be rebuilt?
Right.
Did you have a job when you came back?
Yeah, I did. I came back and had a job, but it was over the hill.
Oh.
So I didn't. I was in school still, but I worked for. I think at that time I might have worked for UPS or something. I did a morning shift, and then I worked at Wells Fargo Bank too. So those were the kind of the jobs I had in college. But it wasn't like I was a full-time student. But I just like. I feel like one of the things that really kind of makes me feel that the earthquake had kind of a tremendous impact, because it really was kind of a shift in looking at like the places that I remember as a kid, like the Cooper House, and you had the candy store that was in the basement, and I can remember coming from the valley down during the holidays, whether it be Easter or Halloween, you'd go to individual stores and you could trick or treat, or even during Easter, some of the stores would have chocolate bunnies, and that you'd get, and then it became something different, kind of like after the earthquake, kind of things changed a little bit, where it wasn't, that the mall definitely is much different than it was before.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think that the earthquake, of course, impacted the community in multiple ways, but I think one of the things that a lot of disasters and tragedies bring the community together, and I think that was another good example of where this community, but the whole Bay Area really kind of came together. I'll never forget the visual. I wasn't downtown at the time, of course, but the president came and visited Santa Cruz. I don't know if we've had a president visit Santa Cruz since then, but that was pretty impressive. And things like ride sharing became much more popular because just the roads and everything were a little bit more, I don't know.
Yeah.
The Highway 17 Express.
Highway 17
Highway
Express
17
kind of came into play because of that, I believe.
You're right.
So a little bit more of just, people kind of coming together was a nice result, I think, of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Even that because I was by myself that night, one of our neighbors who I haven't really met before, invited me to stay at her house. So once again, just community. She had everybody. We had lived in a little cul-de-sac. Everybody come stay at her house, and it really brought the community, I thought, together. It really impacted my life because May of that same year, I was in a really bad car accident, and I had multiple surgeries and had just come back to work not too long before that, and then have this huge kind of life-changing event happen again. So it really made me think about life and who's important in my life, and what impact I want to have kind of while I'm here. It really impacted me a lot.
Well, I think another
Both those things.
to add to that, as a parent, you have chosen to, well, you had the opportunity to work over the hill, but your reasoning is no, I want to have because I work over the hill, obviously. Well, not obviously, I work over the hill, and you were adamant that one of us stayed on this side of the hill in case something were to happen, a natural disaster, what have you, that somebody would be here with our kids. So it stayed with you all the way through, parenthood, and that affected your choice in jobs and where you work.
That's
right.
It
Just
informs
to make sure
a lot
that-
of your decision-making processes.
I'll say this too, just about the earthquake too. When I was being in Italy at the time, it was like you had this earthquake happen here in Santa Cruz, and then about less than a month later, the Berlin Wall fell, and it was like I can remember being there where at the same time I'm thinking about all the destruction and thinking about people kind of packing around and feeling like there's not there's some places people lost their homes and people weren't able to go back, and then seeing the same kind of level of kind of like people migrating from Eastern Europe. You had these little tiny cars there that were like the old Datsuns, the little square style cars stacked high with like mattresses, all their personal belongings, and feeling like, wow, the world is just upside down, feeling like all the things that were going on at the time.
One destruction kind of causing some devastation, and another destruction resulting in like a new way of life.
But it's like it was something where I just like it kind of made it even seem more like, wow, just like I felt very, very like you were saying, like after the earthquake alone, I felt like, man, I needed to be home. Like you're just feeling like you got to come home. Things don't feel right. You're away, and so.
How many months
I was
later did you come back?
I came back in January.
That's what I thought.
In January 1990.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
quite a while after.
Yeah. Few months. I was going to
Study
school
abroad.
there. But it's like I feel like just that makes you appreciate Santa Cruz, that to come through an experience like that where that okay, that was a complete devastation. The tents that were downtown.
Yeah, that's right.
I always think about too all the businesses that before I left that were down there. Like you had, I didn't know there were different types of Ford's department store, but you also had like you had, I think it was Cafe Zena, or it was Pergolaces that was behind
Cafe
Bookshop.
Pergolesi.
No, but they were behind Bookshop,
right?
With that little brick courtyard.
Yes.
And then it's kind of interesting to think of these places as they change. You have these recollections of what they looked like before.
Right.
The coffee shop that was closer to the clock tower?
It was behind where bookshops used to be. Bookshop was over near where now where that vacant now that's almost developed.
But it's towards that side of the mall, right?
Going up towards the clock tower on the left, and then you go behind it. There used to be a coffee shop that was a fun place to hang out, and you think of the small businesses that were there that that after the earthquake they weren't, and there's this. Like before the ID building and the ID store that was there, and lots of local businesses that once existed.
Yeah, down there, lots of lives that really
were impacted.
Yeah.
So I think the coffee shop, Santa Cruz Coffee Roasting, wasn't down on that end of the mall too.
It wasn't? I don't remember.
I believe
where
it was.
I don't remember.
Yeah, because I think that's where one of the, that's where
So-
one of the deaths took
fatality.
place.
So now Marini's is leaving downtown. When did they start? Did they say they started, was it 30 years ago or 20 years ago that they started downtown?
I think it was 30 years.
Yeah, that's what I thought it
Really?
was. 30.
Interesting.
That was
Okay.
30. Yeah.
So they're one
In
of the
that-
few people that were there at the time that are leaving, that made it through, but
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
But I mean, there's always transition, things happen,
Yeah.
but it's interesting just to see those types of changes and how it evolves.
Yeah.
Because you were talking about the community coming together. There was Vision Santa Cruz that was
Right.
formed that kind of looked at how
that's right.
how the city could rebuild and work together. And there was a large group. Larry Pearson from the cookie company was someone who had a really strong leadership role in making sure that there was the focus on rebuilding the downtown and not
Right.
not letting things get.
Didn't they create ambassadors, downtown ambassadors as part of that too, or is that later?
I don't know. I just know that it was more of like a longer term planning process to bring in like how you rebuild the downtown, but definitely having a focus on the future and how you rebuild and make the town right again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned how the earthquake still impacts your life in a way that perhaps you make decisions or things like that. Do you now take precautions against natural disasters, having lived through a pretty significant one?
I have to say I'm not really good at that. I have a list of everything we need to do. I know we have canned food. And we have flashlights and candles because where we live the power goes out a lot. But I'm not as good about preparing for that. We've talked about it too.
I feel like I think we were all born and raised in Northern California, and so like earthquakes happen, and so I don't know if I mean
It's kind of part of the life.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so I don't know, maybe there's other things that
That we could do.
that we could do. But I don't know how it's changed like my planning
Yeah.
for
Well, everything. We have our smartphones. That solves everything.
yeah.
Totally. What is it like to reflect on your experience 30 years later?
Like just thinking about what happened.
Yeah.
or-
Has time or distance given you different perspective, or does it feel like it was yesterday, or does it feel like it was 30 years ago, or have you, like, when you reflect on this event?
Well, it has changed. As I had mentioned, those two experiences really changed my life and the way I think about how I live my life and who I interact with, and how I try to think about how I interact with people, because you just never know what will happen. It's changed how I've approached a job and where I'm going to get a job. So I think it's given me kind of that perspective. It's given me a greater appreciation to the people that are here and to life, I guess. Had some pretty significant experiences in '89. So.
Yeah. For me, it's weird. On one hand, it seems like it's a long time ago. It does seem like it's 30 years ago. But on the other hand, when you start talking about it and recollecting this stuff, it doesn't seem like it was too long ago. And there's some things that you can, pictures that you can see, like bring up on some of those old pictures that we've seen over and over again that brings you right back. But it's a much different stage of our life at that time too.
Yeah.
We're just getting started, just got out of college, but yeah, I mean, I think everything has as a result of that in this area. I think things have gotten better, ultimately safer and things like that. Public safety wise, I think things have improved. Communication wise, I think things have improved. So I just don't remember there being a lot of, fortunately downtown, there wasn't a lot of death, and there was a lot of old buildings, you know, brick buildings that collapse, and which is why California doesn't have a lot of brick buildings, earthquakes. But I think we're pretty. At the time, it was just scary and tragic and all that. But considering the old buildings and them collapsing, I mean, I remember helping clear out Gottschalks after the whole dust settled, literally. Crumbled walls all around, and so for us to only experience one loss of life, I think was pretty good, pretty significant, you know, in that respect. So it's pretty, looking back, it's pretty fortunate for us.
And for me, I just feel like it really created a strong connection with Santa Cruz, like being away, and then, you know, you see, you know, how I recollected things when I was a kid, you know, you remember what the places were like, and then to see something like that where you just see the devastation from afar, it makes you feel like you wanted to be, you know, be there and a part of it. And so I feel like, yeah, it's our home now, and we do love it, and the memory is really, it's terrible to see what's happened. I mean, in terms of how the mall was, but it's nice to know that, you know, you can kind of overcome that, rebuild, and still move forward. And you know, there's been tragedies that have happened before, you know, flooding downtown and other things, and knowing that if people work together, they can, you know, they can really kind of make for a stronger community for the future and for the next generation.
Well, I think also as a result, building codes have been probably quite changed since 1989.
No, but for the
to help us, you know, again, build safer buildings and everything else, right? I think we've learned from it that way too.
Yeah, just as a community, though, not to just kind of like let it go, where you know that you can kind of go back forward and like rebuild.
Yeah.
Not just the new standards, but the idea that you don't like turn your back on it. You still kind of keep investing in the town and keep like working towards make improvements.
Yeah.
A sort of metaphoric rebuilding.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add that we haven't covered?
Not me.
The only thing I was thinking of, because I know, as David said, we went to the Cooper House a lot when we were little, and it's an iconic building, and it's unfortunate that it's gone. And I remember when it was knocked over, watching the ball hit it, and it took a lot for it to even make an impact. And that was hard, but it kind of showed the strength of, I think, Santa Cruz County, and it took a lot for it to come down. So yeah, that was the only other thing I was going to add. That's too bad that had to happen, but it's an icon in our county.
Well, I appreciate all three of you sharing your story with us. I'm really excited to share this with everybody else. And if there's not anything else that you feel like you want to say, we're done.